Hey everybody, John Lorden here. Welcome to another episode of BrainScratch Searchlight for today, September 27th, 2017. I want to give a big thank you to Mike for letting me know about today's case. This is another one that is a bit recent. We have a family missing a loved one, maybe a little bit of hard feelings between the family and the detective now working on the case. We're going to touch on some of that. I can see there's a lot of articles being written about this, but not a lot of detail coming out. Are we going to get to the bottom of this case, even just in terms of understanding the basics? Possibly, but I think we're going to have to parallel information that we're getting from law enforcement and the family, and then kind of decide from there what seems to be right. It's really an interesting one. I've never seen a case that has so many articles being written about it, but they're really not going into detail very strongly. They're really saying very little. So the case that we're talking about today is David Gipson Smith. And here we can see some pictures of him. I wanted to start with this photo collage because please take a look. He has some pretty extensive tattoo work, in particular on his chest. So definitely some good identifiable marks. Outside of that, this guy is 6'4". So, if you see him in a crowded room, he's probably going to stick out a little bit. Let's start with NamUs at the NamUs profile and see what we can learn about this case. David Gipson Smith, missing since August 6th, 2017. He is 28 years old. He is white. He is male. Here they have a little variance on his height, but I've been seeing in several other sources, I think they've got it pretty much locked in at 6'4". His weight is about 230 to 235 pounds. The circumstances, he went missing in a city called Woodbine that is in Maryland, in Howard County. And they actually included a news release here for the circumstances. So we're going to get a good dose of details here. Police searching for missing New Jersey man. David Gipson Smith, 28, reported missing while visiting Maryland. Howard County police are asking for the public's help in the search for a man who has been reported missing. Police received a report August 12th that David Gipson Smith, 28, of Piles Grove, New Jersey, was last seen in the Woodbine area on August 6th. Smith's family contacted police August 12th to report that Smith had not returned home or reported to work after coming to Maryland on August 5th to visit a friend. The family reported that it was unusual for Smith to be out of contact for an extended period of time, and that they were concerned for his welfare. They told police they believed a friend had dropped Smith off in the general area of the 2000 block of Woodbine Road on August 6th. Police responded to the area in Woodbine and initiated a search. Police and fire personnel have conducted land and air searches for Smith in woods around the area and conducted a search of a nearby pond. Just real quick, let's jump to a Google map. Here we can see 2000 Woodbine Road. And you can see it looks like just a ton of open land in this area. I believe this might be the pond that they're talking about right back here. So supposedly that has already been searched. Officers have canvassed the surrounding area and have spoken with local residents, but there have been no sightings of Smith or indications of his whereabouts. Investigators have checked with local hospitals and shelters in the search for Smith. They have interviewed his friends and family and confirmed that no one has been in contact with him. Due to the duration of his absence, police are concerned for his welfare. Smith is described as a white male, 6'4", weighing 230. Police do not have a clothing description. Keep in mind, he was going away to visit friends, although I'm kind of curious why they couldn't get a clothing description from those friends. Supposedly, they've been cooperating with police, so that's a little bit of a question in all this. Of course, they have contact information. I will have that in the description box below, so you can use that if you hopefully have some information on where David Smith is. Brown hair, brown eyes. They mentioned the tattoo, large tattoo on chest with the words, "What do you stand for?" He also has ear piercings, but they don't say which ear, or is it both? Outside of that, nothing really else in terms of physical characteristics. Clothing and accessories are unknown. Transportation method, we're going to find out as we dive into the details, but he took his own car out to Maryland, stopped at one place, that he was supposed to stay at, couldn't stay there, went to another place that he really wasn't that familiar with the person. I guess he had spoken to her only once before, stayed there possibly for one night. I have kind of my own questions about that. But at some point, her family said he can't stay there. She then drove him to that area that we looked at on the Google map, which I have huge questions about. Why would she have driven him out? Why did he not agree to take his own car? I really don't know, but his car has basically been recovered by his family, so there's nothing noted here in terms of transportation methods. Dental information is available, will be entered later. DNA samples have been submitted, and fingerprint information, they do have fingerprint information. David does have a little bit of a checkered past. He certainly had his challenges. We're going to touch on that as we go forward. And then, of course, we have several pictures here of him. But let's continue just taking a look at the articles. I just wanted to give you guys kind of an overview of the types of articles I'm seeing time and time again. This one is for baltimore.cbslocal.com, and it's from August 16th. So admittedly, this is just a couple of days after the missing person report was filed, 4 days later. But you can see there's really nothing for detail. They're giving even a more simple version than we just read at NamUs. No additional details in here. Just confirmation on 6'4", 230-pound white male, and then contact information. Another one at BaltimoreSun.com. This one looks like there's a little bit more text, but really not really, and definitely no further details. Now, luckily, there has been some coverage that was just done by NBC News. They've released this within the past few days. So here we get a little more insight into David and what could potentially be going on with him, but we're now looking, when this was posted, he was missing for 49 days. So by the time this video is posted, I think it's going to be about 51 or 52 days that he's been missing. So after a rough few years, David was on his way back up, according to family. While attending school for PGA golf management at Methodist University on a partial scholarship, David had developed a habit of drinking too much, family members said. He returned home after spending 2 years at the university. Quote, "The pressures of school weighed heavily on him," David's mother Julie told Dateline. "He just needed some time to reset and regroup. Battling his addiction has been an ongoing fight for a number of years, according to Doug Smith, David's father. He struggled with addiction issues, but he has been doing very well lately," Doug told Dateline. "He completed a program in January and was living with us. He had just purchased a vehicle, though, and we were talking about the next steps for him, which would be to move out." David had been working almost daily as a maintenance worker at a local golf course at the time and had saved up enough money to purchase a blue Toyota Camry. So, we've talked about on the channel here in several of these cases, there's this weird thing that happens with these cases where certain people, once they hear that it's someone that possibly has an addiction problem or might be using drugs of some kind, people almost want to write off the case. They just, well, he's, there's another drug user. You're never going to find him. Who knows what happened to him? And it's horribly unfortunate. I've said this in numerous videos before. Look at the stats. 1 in 10 people deals with an addiction of some kind. If your circle of friends and family is more than 10 people, someone in that group is likely struggling with an addiction, if you know it or not. And that's something I just really like to drive into these videos over and over again. This guy deserves a chance. This is a young man, 28 years old, and we haven't even talked about, yes, he has a little bit of a criminal past. As a matter of fact, just to get it out and be clear about this, and I have to give a very big thank you to Web Sleuths, who did some of this research. Basically, it's really awesome that I have a resource like Web Sleuths where I can look through and see things like this. Someone had found him at mugshots.com, and we got a little bit of information about what kind of stuff was going on. Now, this is a charge from dating back to 2014. It looks like it's a petty theft charge, and they note that this is his first offense, but something is obviously going on with him through this period because he gets an additional charge. This one looks like it is for grand theft, but less than $5,000, and it looks like it's 2 charges wrapped into one for stolen property. And of course, on the first charge, you'll see that they noted it was his first offense. There was no bond amount set. And on the second charge, they set it at $3,000. There's actually a third record for him in here, but based on the dates that I'm seeing, this is for some reason another posting of the same charge from September of 2014. So it seems like he's had two kind of brushes with the law for theft of some kind. If he really is struggling with something, possibly more than just an alcohol addiction, it's not uncommon that sometimes people will start stealing things so they can try to feed that addiction. It seems to be a bit of a normal pattern in stories like this. But does that mean that we should just give up on this guy? And keep in mind, when someone goes missing like this, of course, we're concerned about their safety, but it's really also about helping the family. His family is in a severe amount of pain right now, and that's a family that was nice enough to support their son, to give him another chance, to help him through a program that he went through, to help him get a job in at least the career path that he wanted, help him start to get back up on his feet, get a vehicle. Did he possibly have a relapse or something like that? We're going to get into more details as we roll forward here. But if you want to see a pretty good article that includes some of the family's thoughts on what's going on here, I highly recommend that you check out the article at nbcnews.com. Of course, there is a link in the description box below for that in the sources section. So let's roll forward to abc2news.com. This one also posted on September 25th. Here we're going to get a little more detail. Investigators have learned that Smith has left home in the past for weeks or sometimes months at a time. Police believe it's possible he may have traveled away from the Maryland area after he went missing. Detectives also have learned that Smith packed many of his belongings when he left New Jersey, including luggage and other possessions. Before we get to this last thing, well, actually, let me get to this first since it ties in a little bit. Since his disappearance, police say there has been no activity on his cell phone, no use of his debit or credit cards, and no postings on his social media accounts. So the main takeaways that I'm looking at in terms of this article, so maybe he left home before and he would disappear for weeks or even months at a time. This guy's 28 years old. I don't think that that is necessarily completely out of the realm of possibility, or that might even mean that something wrong or bad is going on here. And we're going to get some more input about these specific statements from his family soon. Detectives have learned about him taking his luggage and other possessions. That's a pretty interesting piece. But according to the information from his family, he was considering moving to this area. Now, we don't really know this girl that he went out to visit, or this lady that he went out to visit, was this a potential romantic interest? Was he thinking about possibly moving in with her or something along those lines? I don't think we're going to find answers to those questions in the information we're reviewing today. But if he is considering about possibly moving out, we know that he was speaking to his father about the possibility of him moving out. Is it really that strange for him to get some of his possessions out to the area where he wants to move to? Not necessarily, especially if there is some chance that this was a romantic relationship of some kind. Maybe he asked, hey, can I bring some stuff and we can store it at your place for a while? When I started dating my wife, we lived pretty far apart and we both wound up doing that. There was a lot of stuff of hers that was over at my place and a lot of stuff of mine that was over at her place because it just wasn't feasible for us to drive back and forth, every single night. I mean, it would literally add hours and hours to our commutes. So I don't know that this stuff is really so far out there. I'm really curious about these type of details coming out as opposed to some of the more important details that we were wondering about earlier, like clothing description. I can't believe there's no clothing description. And I'm also curious about cell service in the area. His family believes that his cell phone stopped working on Sunday morning. They believe that the power had run out on his cell phone. But I have not seen anything confirming that area has good cell service. Could it just be that his cell phone was taken out of coverage? That would also default the phone to going directly to voicemail if someone called it. So But we can see clearly someone in law enforcement is speaking because there are some new details being released to the public. As a matter of fact, it continues on another article here at baltimore.cbslocal.com. They mentioned that there's a reward of up to $5,000 now being offered. Howard County Police say they received information that Smith was using drugs, possibly heroin, the day before he went missing, and that he did not have a place to stay. He even reportedly had planned to spend the night outside. A lot of really interesting questions there. I'm hoping that the info we get from the family is going to fill in some of the gaps for you guys, but let's continue. Police say Smith appeared to have taken possessions he could carry, but left the rest behind in the car. Once again, pretty interesting analysis, but we don't know specifics of what they're talking about here. And why do we assume that he took those possessions? Could someone else have gotten into his car? Did he possibly leave it unlocked? Especially when you're talking about possessions that could be carried. Is there some possibility that it could have been theft of some kind? I don't know. While police have found no evidence of foul play, detectives say they are concerned for Smith's welfare due to the duration of his absence and his history of drug and alcohol use, which is another really big thing to note in this case. If this guy is using heroin, again, let's say, I'm assuming that he had a past of doing it before. I don't know if that's true or not, but let's say that he's fallen off the wagon. He's going back to his vices. Isn't he going to need money to continue that? He's not using his debit or credit cards. Now, I can say I have had addiction problems in my family that I've been dealing with ever since I was a child. I was watching family members of mine go through this, and I would watch all the different tricks that they did for getting money from the family members that were unaware of their drug problems. Money is very, very important to addicts. So the fact that he's not using money that he already has is extremely strange. Even outside of he's not using his cell phone, he's not using social media. Yes, people do occasionally decide they want to leave those things or they want to leave their life behind. That's fine. But how do you do that if you're not taking your car? And maybe he didn't want a car payment. Maybe he bought it and it's on a loan and he wanted to dump all that also. Okay, fine. I'll give you all of that. But he's not taking cash. He's not emptying his accounts. Even if he is going, falling off the wagon, isn't that something that he's going to do? What drug addict out there is going to say, yeah, I've got these plastic cards in my pocket and that would give me a bunch of money and we can go score it. I could just blow out this whole weekend or blow out the whole week or however far I can stretch that. Nah, I'm just going to leave that money in those accounts. I'm not going to use it. Oh, and by the way, how am I eating? Where am I sleeping? We don't even know how many clothes did he have with him if he left his car behind. I don't think he probably had all the clothes that he had taken for this weekend trip. A lot of very, very tough questions in this case. And I'm telling you, the level of detail I'm seeing is it's not making me feel real comfortable. I feel like something is really wrong in what's going on with this case. Maybe you'll agree with me, but let's continue on the information. So Howard County Police Department has a Facebook page, and I could see that they released a press release here, and all the information that I told you guys from those two articles is basically coming from this press release. There's not a whole lot of more information. It just talks about the searches that they've done. It's nailing the same stuff. They've heard that he's been doing drugs. They think he took some possessions out of his car. What's interesting about this press release is, according to Web Sleuths, his mom actually responded to that particular press release. Now, I can't find it on the Facebook page, but I am seeing people in the comments section say they think that the mother's comments might have been removed from here. I can only see one section, which is kind of her original story about what he went through, and we're going to go through that word for word. But first, I want to read her statement that is a response to the Howard County Police Department's claims. Dear Detective Tanis and the Howard County Police Department, I am David's mother. I am outraged at what you have chosen to post on your site. Were we in the same room together last Tuesday? You have chosen to report information that the suspects in this case gave you. Your information regarding his use of heroin the day before is unfounded, and there's no evidence of that. He did not choose to stay outside. According to the suspect herself, she dropped him on the property because her parents wouldn't let him stay with the suspect, and he had nowhere else to go. Because her parents didn't want him at their house, she in fact drove him there herself and left him. The property is owned by the witness/suspect's family. I just want to stop there for a second and say this is extremely suspicious to me. We're getting back to that initial question. Even if this girl is saying, you know what, you can come stay at this land that's owned by my family. There's no buildings on there, a couple of rusted out cars, but you can, sit by a fire pit and be close to the pond. Why is he not going to take his vehicle? Now, there's a little more detail that we're going to get from Julie Smith about potential reasons why he wouldn't have taken his vehicle, namely this property being owned by an uncle that didn't want anyone on there. But still, couldn't he have taken his vehicle somewhere nearby, parked it off of road, and then walked the rest of the way to this area, or gotten a ride from this friend of his? It seems so odd to me that this guy is just agreeing to, take me somewhere that I don't know, that is out in the middle of nowhere, and just leave me there. And now I don't need my car. The logic defies me in that. Back to the post. From whom did you hear that David had left home for weeks or months at a time? That certainly was not a part of our conversation when we were speaking with you, or you misinterpreted what we said completely. Anytime he was away from home, there was a purpose, and he never lost contact with us when he was away. Your statement that he had packed many of his belongings is outrageous. As we mentioned in our meeting, he had only packed 2 small suitcases and 4 shoe boxes for his shoes because he keeps all of his shoes in boxes even here at the house. Most of his possessions, as you put it, are home in his closet. Again, you state that according to witnesses, Smith left his car parked in Elkridge and asked for a ride from a friend on the day of his disappearance. I can hardly believe you wrote this statement. You and I both know that the witness described by you in our meeting as suspect drove him to the property in her car because she said if her uncle saw an unrecognized car on the property, he would be angry. The reason David went to the property for the night was because the suspect's parents didn't want him staying at her home. She was going back to get him after her parents left on vacation, and then he could stay with her for the week. It is clear you chose not to include any of our statements, did not hear a word we said, and you clearly believe the witness/suspect, who is an admitted heroin addict herself, is the one telling the truth. I'm appalled at what you have written in this article and the unprovable lies that are included in it, and your choice to leave out any statements that we made to you. We agreed that it was okay to discuss his past usage, but also asked you to include that for the past 9 months while living at home, there was no heroin usage and a few relapses with alcohol. The last statement my husband made as we were leaving the room is, please don't paint him as a drug addict. You clearly chose to use the witness/suspect's words over parents with whom David had been living for the past 9 months and have known him for 28 years. My hope and trust in you for allowing this trash to be written is gone. I no longer have faith in you. I thought you were really interested in solving this case, not spreading the lies of the witness suspect. The person who sat in the room with us last Tuesday and that wrote this article are not the same person. I'm just overwhelmed at what you chose to include and not include in your wild statement. Just wow. Based on what you wrote in this article, are you really looking for him or choosing to label him as just another drug addict who doesn't deserve the same treatment? Unbelievable. I initially had hope in the Howard County Police, who were so helpful in the beginning. Thanks to those wonderful patrol officers who were the first responders. Now I feel betrayed by the detective noted above, or hope ever getting to the truth. I think she missed a word in there somewhere. Julie Gibson Smith. The other possibility I didn't mention is that perhaps she removed that comment herself. And we've talked about this on this show a lot before too. There is usually a point somewhere between 1 month to 2 months after someone goes missing, where the family gets upset with the investigation because there's so much attention that initially happens when they first get the report going and there's searches that are going on, but then things kind of slow down if the investigation is, running short on leads to continue processing and following. So it sucks because I can feel this woman's pain. I have to say that the information about him being an addict could be helpful if it was publicly released, because then you have people that are in different walks of life that might consider, hey, I remember someone talking about something. I was at this party or something. The more truth that you can get out there in these cases, I believe, the better chance the public has to help in these cases. So I agree that they probably could have been a little more respectful with how they put this out. They could have mentioned that, yes, he used to be a heroin addict, but he's been through a program. He's been clean for the last 9 months. But we are being told from someone that he could possibly be using it again. I mean, I think there's ways to phrase it. I don't know that press report or press releases from police departments are the most sensitive things ever written. I think that there is get the facts out and make it very clear and simple mentality that is built into those types of communications. So I'm feeling it on both sides, and it just feels unfortunate. And, if Julie happens to see this video, Julie, I would just encourage you to please work with these feelings, try to move through this, try to reconnect with the Detective Tanis. I don't know if apologies have to be made on one side or the other, whatever. The important thing is that you guys are moving forward together. You need this guy's help. Believe me, you need this guy's help, and you want him to be in a good mindset and willing to help you if information comes across his desk. But with that being said, it has to be fair. And, you make some pretty compelling arguments here that why are they deferring to this information that they've heard from someone that they might be considering a suspect? Even if they're considering it just a person of interest, why are you going to publicize that information necessarily? I don't know. It could be a method of some kind. It could be that they're trying to shake something loose. I really don't know. Sometimes there's different reasoning for why these messages are put out in the way that they are. But obviously, the way this message came out hurt the family, created a few articles from the media that are hurting the family, and I totally get that. So what is the family's story on what happened to David Smith? There's a few places you can see it. First of all, it was reposted on the Facebook page for the police department in the comments down here. So you could find it there. You could also go to facebook.com Missing David Gibson Smith, and you will find it in here as well. Or you can go to their GoFundMe, which is, they were looking to raise $13,000. They are over $12,000 already. And all of these locations have an exact same copy of the message from the family. So what is this message? Let's get into it. My name is Julie Gibson Smith, and my husband is Douglas James Smith. Our son, David Gibson Smith, age 28, went missing on August 6, 2017 from Lisbon, Maryland. He was intending to visit a friend in Catonsville, Maryland, and possibly move to that location. David left our home on Saturday, August 5th at 8:30 a.m. in the morning. My husband, Doug, was in touch with him through texting twice that day, making sure he got to where he was going safely, to which David responded, yes. The friend he was meeting had a change of plans and would not be able to have David in her home for the weekend. So his friend gave David the number of a friend of hers that David could hang out with for the weekend. He had not been previously introduced to this person face to face, but had had one conversation with her previously. So it is our understanding that David drove from Catonsville to Ellicott City to meet this woman at her home. He supposedly stayed with this woman and her family overnight on Saturday, August 5th, but created a problem. I really wish there was a little more detail about that. I don't know what they mean by that, but created a problem because the parents didn't want him to stay. When Doug tried to get in touch with David early Sunday, August 6th, around 7:55 a.m., David's phone was dead, therefore making it impossible for us to reach David. Our suspicion was that the phone had lost its charge. We did not have the name of his new friend, nor did we have contact information for his friend in Catonsville. The last text that David sent out was to his friend in Catonsville at 12:19 a.m. August 6th. She returned his text at 12:21 a.m. At 12:36 a.m., the friend from Catonsville called David and they spoke for 5 minutes. At 4:10 a.m., David received a call from the woman in Ellicott City and they spoke for 2 minutes, indicating he either was not inside her home or had left her home. That, to me, is a very interesting thing that's going on there. We're hearing in the earlier part of the story that David was actually staying at her home through the night. If that's true, why at 4:10 is he receiving a call from her if they're literally in the same house? It doesn't make sense. As I mentioned earlier, we tried texting David at 7:55 on the 6th, and by that time, his phone was dead. The only other text that came into his phone on the 6th was at 2:49 p.m., but again, that person got no response because the phone was dead. The phone was never on again after 4:10 a.m. Saturday, August 6th, and has remained that way to this very minute. We had determined by Tuesday, August 3rd that there was a problem. By Wednesday, August 4th, we had our phone records and began calling the most prominent numbers, which were the two women from Maryland. Finally, we made contact with them on Friday. It took them at least 24 hours to respond. And by Saturday, August 12th, the woman from Ellicott City met us at an abandoned piece of property in Lisbon that her uncle owned, and where she said she dropped David off on Sunday, August 7th. She told us she dropped him off there on Monday, August 8th, which totally doesn't make sense. Maybe she's getting her days wrong or something. She said they spent the day there all day Sunday. The only thing on the property is a pond, a fire pit, and hammock next to the pond. And as stated above, the rest of the property was abandoned except a few abandoned cars and junk. She drove him out on the property in her car, and he left his car at the home because supposedly the uncle who owns the property would be mad if he knew someone was staying there. She actually told us that she mentioned to David that if he saw the uncle on the property, David should hide and keep out of sight. Once again, we're not seeing any information about this uncle potentially being interviewed. I would have to assume that he's been interviewed, but we understand, okay, the guy would be mad if someone was on his property. Did he potentially find David out there? I really don't have an answer to that question, but obviously it's something that needs to be looked into more by authorities. She left him on the property with nothing, no food, no water, and told him she would be back. Unfortunately, she did not return to the property until Wednesday, August 9th. So she says. She said that when she went to take a tub of supplies to him on Wednesday, he was gone. She said she went back on Friday, August 11th, to check, and the tub of supplies had not been touched. That was the day she finally returned our phone calls. We met her, she volunteered, on the property on Saturday, August 12th. He was nowhere to be seen. She showed me what was in the supply tub that she supposedly took him on Wednesday, and the contents of the tub was a blanket, a Coleman lantern, some magazines, etc., but absolutely no food or water. Once again, this is really, really strange. I mean, if this is the type of place where he's going to need a lantern to be there at night, he's going to need a blanket, possibly. I don't know how cold it gets in this part of the country at this time of year. But even outside of that, she didn't take any food or water. And even outside of that, she didn't take any of this until Wednesday when he'd already been there for over 3 days. This really is not logical. I'm not sure she even checked on him on Wednesday or took the tub to him until Saturday morning when she knew we were on our way. Kind of a good thought. I also assume she cleaned up as much of the campsite as she could of any evidence of them having been there because of the threat of the uncle. But there were some fresh bottles left there, empty and in plain view. After 45 minutes of searching the property ourselves, it's 22 plus acres, we asked her to call the police, which she gladly did, and the investigation and police involvement began. After calling the police, the woman left, stating she had to go to work for 2 hours. The first patrol officers were on site in about 15 minutes and immediately placed David on the National Missing Persons website and began calling hospitals, morgues, jails, and other medical facilities in the tri-state area with no hits. They flew in a helicopter that had infrared camera over the pond and property. They brought in a boat with divers and a sonar submersible and water cadaver dog with no signs of David. The women showed back up on the property and the patrol officers interviewed them individually. At the end of the day, we were told to take David's car home because it shouldn't be left in front of a suspect's home. There's that word again, which we did. Sunday, August 13th, I was called by one of the sergeants and told that the case was being handed over to the detective in charge of criminal missing persons and that he would be in contact. Monday, the lead detective called us and was unhappy that the car had been brought home. So on Tuesday, about 8 Woodstown State Police troopers came to process David's car. Also, officers in Howard County went back to collect evidence from the property. We started a social media blitz as instructed by the detectives, and so many of you have gratefully lended your time, gifts, and prayers have assisted us in doing. We've had so many people give up their time to go on searches, hand out flyers, post flyers, talk to people, follow leads on your own, call to speak words of kindness and encouragement. So many of you posting the same. God bless you for this incredible movement of grace. Forward to day 48. Today, there have been very few leads that have been verifiable that have come to us or the detectives. We have just met with the detectives again, who say they don't have any real leads, but they are getting to do another media blitz. I'm not sure exactly how that will be accomplished. From our end, we are putting together a media team in an effort to reach television platforms. We are trying to find a team of private investigators who are credible and have a reputation for integrity and successful outcomes. Meanwhile, we'll be trying to post updates and encouragement each evening on the Facebook missing page. Like, share. More words just of inspiration and encouragement, which quite honestly, the words need to turn around this conversation and go back to Julie and Doug. This case really is kind of tugging at the heartstrings for me, because it's the parents. I really feel what the parents are going through here. I really admire that they were working with him and helping him work through his problems and try to reboot his life. And the fact that they're facing all this pain right now is really, really tough. What's going on here? Did he leave of his own accord? I think I've spoken to that in the video earlier. I think there's a lot of questions that would lead me personally to believe he's not left of his own accord. Something else has happened here. I know on Web Sleuths there was a lot of conversation about, did he possibly relapse and then have an overdose of some kind? I hate to consider that, but I think that you have to look into that scenario, especially when you have this very interesting question about why he did not take his own vehicle to this other location where he would be staying. If nothing else, just so he could go back to his car and sleep in it, listen to the radio, recharge his cell phone, all those things. It really doesn't seem to me like it was a logical step for him to leave his car behind. Now, was he possibly in a state of mind where he wasn't thinking logically? I think we have to consider that as well. Are these two women telling the truth? I don't know. There's a lot of problems that I have with this story about him being taken out to the land, the supply drop that she did that doesn't really include any food or anything, and it came numerous days later. A lot of those facts, they don't really feel to me like it's the truth being told, but that is admittedly just my feeling. Is there something else going on here? Did he maybe upset her family in such a way where someone in her family harmed him or did something to him? Is that land possibly a false herring in this whole thing, or a red herring, I think is the proper term? Something meant to distract police and take them away from the actual scene? Possibly. And that might be why the detective was so upset that the car had been removed from that family's home location. I don't know if when they processed it, did they find anything that would lead them to believe that there was any type of violence conducted against him or anything along those lines. Of course, we're not getting those kind of details in this communication. This is just a really tough case to look into because of these kind of fluffy news stories that started it off. But I think that Julie is... she's really done a good thing in writing this version out, because now we at least have some points that we can discuss, that people can look into. If you have friends that live in the areas that we've talked about here, please send them this video. Let's raise exposure to this case. Who knows? Maybe they can actually start getting some television coverage on this case as well. But even if they do get that, I hope it's coverage that actually digs into the details and provides a bit more of a complete story, because outside of the one Dateline article that I saw, these articles are just, they're not very helpful except for getting out the basics of how tall this guy was and, you know, how much he weighed. And if for some reason this does get back to law enforcement, can we just get a clothing description on this guy? You had two people that interacted with him. How come we don't have a clothing description? Can we even possibly get one from his family looking through the clothes that were still there so they could determine what's missing? Just something along those lines. It's just really, really odd to me that it's such a basic of missing persons cases to have a clothing description, and we don't. I don't know. Really, really, really tough one to look into. By the way, for Julie and Douglas, or for anyone else that might deal with a missing persons case, someone in your family going missing and you not knowing what to do or things to try, please go to www.brainscratchers.com. Don't forget the W's. For some reason, the page won't load right if you don't use them. When you go there, there is a tab on the upper left specifically for missing person tips. And I've done a bunch of research. I've put a few videos together. I've got a ton of other resources there, all kinds of different stuff for you to try and to hopefully help you find that missing loved one and bring them home. I don't know, Brain Scratchers. This is a really, really tough case. Let's talk about it in the comments below. I ask we please be respectful. Like I mentioned earlier in the video, this guy is not an angel. He's had his problems, but that doesn't mean that his family deserves to be going through what it's going through, or that he deserves possibly what could have happened to him, which we don't know for sure, but it sure seems mysterious to me. It seems like something is wrong with this case. And best of luck to the detectives working on this case. I hope you guys are able to crack this and to help bring him home to his family. Thank you everyone for hanging out with me on today's episode. I appreciate each and every one of you that watch this, share this, help raise awareness on these cases. Take care, and I'll see you back here tomorrow on the Lord and Arts channel.